He came home smiling like he just won something. That's the image I keep coming back to. My husband walking through our front door with a tan he didn't have 9 days ago, rolling his carry-on behind him like a man without a single regret in the world. He kissed me on the cheek. He ruffled our son's hair. He said, "God, I missed you guys." And I said, "Welcome home." That was it. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just stood in my own kitchen, in the house we'd bought together 6 years ago, and I smiled back at him. Because I already knew everything. Let me back up. My husband and I met in our mid-20s at a work happy hour. He was in sales. I was in marketing. We were at the same company for about 8 months before we started dating, and by the time I was 28, I had a ring on my finger and a timeline I thought I understood. We got married. We moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. We bought a house in a neighborhood with good schools, because that's what you do when you think you know how your life is going to go. We had our son. I went part-time after that. My husband got promoted twice. From the outside, we looked exactly like what we were supposed to look like. I was 32 when things started to feel off. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't one thing. It was more like, have you ever noticed when a smell disappears from a room? You don't notice it while it's there. You only notice it when it's gone. That's what it was like with him. Some warmth just quietly left the room, and one day I looked up and thought, when did it get so cold in here? He started working later. He started taking his phone to the bathroom. He started laughing differently on calls, quieter, almost careful, like he was measuring the volume. I told myself it was a stressful quarter. I told myself we were just in a phase. I told myself a lot of things. Then, in February, he told me his company was sending him to a conference in Denver. 7 days. Sales Leadership Summit. He'd gone to similar things before, so I didn't question it. I helped him pack. I made sure he had the good travel-sized toiletries. I drove him to the airport. He called me on day 2. He called me on day 3. By day 4, the calls got shorter. By day 5, he stopped calling and just texted. By day 6, even the texts felt like obligation. On day 7, I opened our joint banking app to pay the electric bill. I want you to understand something about that moment. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't suspicious in any focused way. I was literally just trying to pay a bill. But the transactions were right there. Denver Marriott Tech Center, $, because there was no Denver Marriott Tech Center charge. There was no Denver hotel charge at all. What there was, a charge to Rosewood Miramar Beach, Montecito, California, $732. Day 1. Then another charge the next day, and the next. I sat down on the kitchen floor, not because I was dramatic. My legs just stopped working the way legs are supposed to. I pulled up the conference website my husband had mentioned, Rocky Mountain Sales Leadership Summit, and it existed. It was real. It had happened. It had ended the previous year. The 2026 event was in Phoenix, not Denver, and it didn't start until April. He hadn't gone to a conference. He had gone to one of the most expensive beach resorts on the California coast. For 9 days, as it turned out, not 7. He'd tacked on 2 extra days I didn't know about. I sat on that kitchen floor for a long time. My son was at my mother's for the week, so there was nobody to perform normalcy for. I just sat there and let myself feel the full weight of what I was looking at. The charges kept going as I scrolled. A spa treatment, a beachside dinner, $214. Wine, more couples kayak rental. Couples kayak rental. I thought about calling him right then. I rehearsed it in my head. His voice answering easy and casual, and me saying, "Who are you kayaking with?" I thought about what he'd say. Some excuse, some version of reality that was technically deniable. I put my phone down. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. I went to bed, and the next morning I got up, and I made myself coffee, and I did something I have never done before in my life. I called a lawyer before I called my mother. Her name was Patricia. Wait, no, I'm not supposed to use. She was a family law attorney in Charlotte, and a friend of mine from college had used her 2 years earlier. I got an appointment for 2 days later. In the meantime, I called my bank separately and froze our joint savings account, not checking, because I didn't want him to notice anything but savings quietly while he was still in California. Then I hired a private investigator, a woman. She came highly recommended. She was in her 50s, no nonsense, and she told me that for a flat fee she could get me documentation that would hold up in any North Carolina courthouse. I said fine. She said she'd have something in 72 hours. I want to tell you I handled those 3 days with grace. I didn't, not entirely. I cried in my car twice. I couldn't eat much. I kept picking up my son from my mum's for a few hours at a time, just to hold him, just to feel like something in my world was solid. My mum knew something was wrong. I told her I was stressed about a work deadline. She brought me a casserole the way mums do, and I ate it, standing over my sink at 10 o'clock at night. But I didn't contact my husband irrationally. I didn't tip him off. Every time he texted me something casual, heading to dinner, miss you, how's the little guy, I texted back something equally casual. Fine, he's great. Enjoy your last couple days. He had no idea. The PI sent me documentation on day 3. Photos. Receipts she'd been able to pull. My husband and a woman I'd seen exactly twice in my life. Once at his company holiday party 2 years ago, once in the background of a photo on his phone that I'd clocked and then told myself meant nothing. She was a colleague of his, based in their Atlanta office. I'll call her what she was, which is the woman who thought she was building something with a man who had a wife and a 6-year-old at home. The documentation included a screenshot of their check-in at the resort. Joint reservation. Her name was on it too. I forwarded everything to my attorney. I printed backup copies. I put them in a folder in the back of my file cabinet behind the tax returns. Then I waited. He came home on the Thursday afternoon. I'd arranged for my mother to have my son for the rest of the day, not because I was planning some dramatic confrontation, but because I didn't want my child anywhere near whatever was about to happen in our house. My husband walked through the door with that smile, that tan, that carry-on. He kissed me on the cheek. I said, welcome home. He talked for a while. Traffic from the airport, how good it was to sleep in his own bed, how the conference had been, and here he gave me some details, polished ones, about sessions he'd attended and conversations he'd had. He'd clearly prepared those details. They sounded natural. They sounded like the truth. I handed him a glass of water and sat across from him at the kitchen table and waited for him to finish. Then I said, very calmly, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think before you answer. He looked at me. Something shifted in his face, not guilt yet, just alertness. The animal sensed that something had changed in the air. Okay, he said. When you were in California, I said, did she mention anything about not feeling well? Any symptoms, anything at all? I watched the color leave his face in real time. It started at his forehead and traveled down, like someone was slowly pulling a shade. His mouth opened, closed. He set his water glass down too hard. What? He said. I'm just asking, I said. Because if she was sick with anything contagious, you might want to get checked out. That's all. He didn't ask how I knew he'd been in California. He didn't ask who she was. The fact that he skipped all of that he went straight to panic, told me everything I needed to know about how long this had been going on and how much he'd been lying to my face. He asked me what I meant. What kind of sick? Was I serious? I told him I didn't know the details. I just thought he should be aware, for his health. He left the house within the hour to go to an urgent care clinic. I'm not making that up. He actually went to an urgent care clinic that evening, while I sat in our living room with a cup of tea and a composure I still don't entirely know how I maintained. He came back 2 hours later with paperwork and a sheepish expression, and I think the beginning of understanding that he had fundamentally miscalculated who he was married to. I let him talk. He wanted to explain. He wanted to tell me it wasn't what it looked like, which is a thing people say when it is exactly what it looks like. I let him go through all of it. I sat there and I listened and I let him run out of words. Then I opened my laptop and I showed him the documentation my attorney had already received. There is a particular kind of silence that happens when someone realizes they have no move left. That was the silence in our kitchen that night. He looked at the photos. He looked at the receipts. He looked at me. He said, "I'm sorry." I said, "I know." He asked if we could try to work through it. He said it had been a mistake. He said he loved me, and I think he even believed that, in the broken, partial way people love things, they're also willing to destroy. I told him I'd had a consultation with a family law attorney before he'd even landed back in Charlotte. He didn't say much after that. The next months were not clean or easy or cinematic. Divorce is paperwork and logistics, and sitting across from someone you used to know while two lawyers talk around you. It's explaining to a 6-year-old why daddy has a different house now, in terms a 6-year-old can absorb without being damaged. It's splitting things you bought together and figuring out who gets the sectional couch. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets get divided fairly, not necessarily equally. I kept the house because we agreed that stability for our son outweighed everything else, and my husband wasn't interested in a lengthy court battle. The joint savings account I'd frozen had about $41,000 in it. My attorney made sure I came out of that process without being buried. The woman from the Atlanta office. I found out through a mutual colleague months later that she had ended things with my husband about 6 weeks after everything came out. Apparently, she'd had no idea he was still living with his wife. She'd believed they were separated. Whether or not that's true, I genuinely don't know. I decided it wasn't my job to figure that out. Some things aren't mine to carry. My ex-husband sees our son every other weekend and one weeknight. He pays child support on time. We've arrived at the quiet functional arrangement that people arrive at when the dust settles, and children are involved and you both choose eventually to be adults about it. I went back to full-time work 8 months after the divorce was finalized. I got a promotion 6 months after that. My mother, who brought me that casserole at 10 o'clock at night and didn't ask questions when I wasn't ready to answer them. She's the one I called the day the divorce was final. I drove to her house and we sat on her porch and she held my hand, and we didn't talk for a long time. She just let me exist next to her. I don't know if I have the words for what that meant to me. People ask me sometimes, mostly in comments, if I'm being honest, whether I regret waiting, whether I should have acted faster, whether I should have made that confrontation uglier, louder, more punishing. I thought about it. In those 3 days of waiting, with my son in my arms and a casserole I could barely eat, I thought hard about what kind of person I wanted to be on the other side of this. I decided I wanted to be someone who didn't blow up her own life in the process of responding to someone else blowing it up. I wanted to be someone my son could look at someday and understand. And I wanted, just once, to watch my husband walk through that door with his easy smile and his borrowed tan, and know in a way he couldn't yet imagine that I was already 3 steps ahead. That part I don't regret at all. I think about the kitchen floor a lot, not with sadness anymore, more like you'd think about a specific moment where everything quietly shifted and you didn't realize it until later. I was just trying to pay the electric bill. That's all. And the truth was just sitting there in a banking app, completely indifferent to how much it was about to cost me. People talk about betrayal like it's a single event, like there's a moment it happens and then a moment it's over. That's not what it felt like. It felt like a long unwinding of assumptions, of routines, of the version of myself who had been telling me everything was probably fine. What I had to find, somewhere in those 3 days of waiting, was the version of myself who could act with a clear head, even when her chest felt like it was caving in. I made choices in those 3 days that I'm genuinely proud of. Not because they were easy, but because they were right. I called a lawyer before I called anyone else. I protected the savings account quietly. I hired someone who could get me documentation that would hold. I didn't blow up the house when my son was still inside it. That restraint, choosing what was actually useful over what felt emotionally satisfying in the moment, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was also the thing that put me 3 steps ahead when he walked through that door with his borrowed tan and his easy smile. There's something I've come to believe about the way life balances itself out, and it has nothing to do with fate or luck or anything handed down from above. It's simpler than that. The choices my husband made, the lies, the hidden charges, the fabricated conference details, those choices created consequences he couldn't outrun, not because the universe punished him, but because deception that extensive requires an exhausting amount of maintenance, and eventually it runs out of room. He ran out of room the moment I opened that app. And the choices I made created their own consequences too. Every calm decision, every moment I didn't send the angry text, didn't tip him off, didn't let fear make me reckless. Those built something. They built a case. They built a position. They built the kind of exit that left me with my house, my savings, my son's stability, and my own integrity intact. My mother didn't ask me what was wrong when she brought that casserole over. She just sat with me. There is a kind of love in that, in knowing when someone needs presence more than advice, that I hope I'm passing on to my son without always having words for it. He's 6. He doesn't understand what happened between his parents. But he sees how I move through the world now. He sees that I go to work and come home and make dinner and laugh at things. He sees that falling apart and putting yourself back together are both possible, and neither one is the end of the story. I don't think of myself as someone things happen to. I think of myself as someone who made decisions under pressure, some of them good, some of them imperfect, and who came out the other side with more clarity about who she is than she had going in. That clarity is not a small thing. It took something real to get there. The smile on his face when he walked through that door, I still see it sometimes. But it doesn't make me angry anymore. It just reminds me that I already knew, and that I was ready, and that some moments of quiet strength matter more than any loud confrontation ever could have.